Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming. So my name is Janet Gyatso, and I'm a professor here of Buddhist Studies at Harvard. And we're very happy to have the honor of having Khenpo Sodargye speak here tonight. This is actually the second time that he visited Harvard. He was already here in 2013, I believe. We just figured out it's been 4 years, and it's really wonderful to see him again. He was born in Kham in 1962, and he was ordained as a monk in 1985, so that means at the age of 23. And he was a student and at the monastery where he is at today, which is either called Serta or Larungar, which is an enormous, amazing monastery. It's a new monastery that was established by Khenpo Jigme Phuntsok, who was an amazing teacher. He's now unfortunately passed away, but he established this very, very large monastery. Actually, I don't have the date when that was established, but I think it was something like the 1970s? Oh, 1980s. Oh, we have some experts here. So it's not a traditional, it hasn't been there for a very long time, but it became extremely popular and still is today. And it's also especially amazing for the very large number of women who are there, nuns. So both monks and nuns are studying there. They have a very rigorous academic program. And the monastery provides a lot of leadership for the lay people and leading certain movements in especially things that I'm especially impressed with, having to do with care of animals and also trying to discourage Tibetans from wearing a lot of animal skins and doing things of that sort, in addition to the explicitly Dharma teachings. Khenpo Sodargye is extremely knowledgeable in Buddhist philosophy, and he has published, he has studied and published books on all kinds of topics in Buddhist philosophy, in Buddhist monasticism, in Buddhist logic, and in Buddhist Tantra. And he has several books in English, and he has a very, very large number of followers who are Chinese speakers, both inside China and in other parts of the world. So it's a great honor to have him tonight. And so we look forward very much to his teachings. And they will be translated by Mr. Tenzin Gelek, who is an expert translator who works at a Trace Foundation in New York City. So thank you. Well.
All right. For this year's talk, preparations had been underway since last year. The initial plan was to give a teaching at the beginning of the year, but due to some reasons on my end, I couldn't make it. As a result, the plans for the first half of the year were not realized as scheduled. It is only now, in November, that I can finally engage with all of you. And so it was delayed until the end of the year. First, let me briefly mention, around the year 2013, as Professor Janet Gyatso just mentioned, I visited here once. I also sat in on one of the professor's classes. At that time, I thought that in this life, though I haven't been a long-term student at Harvard University, having the chance to be a student for 2 hours felt like a very auspicious connection. I still clearly remember that class. The professor was mainly speaking about the biography of Guru Rinpoche, specifically the life story of the Dakini Yeshe Tsogyal. In particular, concerning Yeshe Tsogyal, back in Tibet, she once encountered several men and was raped against her will. Using that as a topic, the professor gave the lecture in English. There were about 14 or 15 students at the time. The students also held a discussion back then. One of the students said that when he was in Nepal, he had heard of a girl who went through the same situation. Another student mentioned that in the United States, a girl had also experienced the same thing. She was deeply saddened and distressed, and it left her with deep psychological scars. They later discussed it further, and what was the conclusion? At that time, Yeshe Tsogyal due to karmic circumstances different from others, had endured such an insult. Although a tremendous shift occurred in her mind, she did not sink into a sea of bitterness. She still gathered her courage to propagate the Dharma, and no obstacles arose in her life. She was a truly extraordinary woman of Tibet, that is what they said. The impression it gave me back then, that single class in my life, although it was only 2 hours long, within that short period, I had two major takeaways. What was the first? I have been a teacher in the East all my life and have given many Dharma teachings, but having the teacher and students sit together at a round table for research and discussion, that was a first for me. Later, when I returned to our academy in our local area, there are also students who study and research Buddhism. I had them try out this new way of learning. It isn't quite right for the teacher to be the only one speaking for a long time. This is not quite appropriate. With the teachers and students at Harvard, the teacher only spoke for a very short time, and then the students discussed among themselves. In this way, the gains were immense and great results were achieved. So after I went back, I gave it a try. On the other hand, in places like Tibet, the biographies of past masters and sages are sometimes dismissed by some people. But if you actually conduct research on them, they actually hold great educational value. I gained a new perspective on this. Today I will mainly speak from the perspective of the mind and the Tibetan Buddhist research to give you a brief talk. We are currently in a unique era. In terms of human history, for the preceding thousands of years, living standards were quite low. Human inventions were not so numerous, and science and technology were not very advanced. Relationships between people were not so guarded. That kind of life continued for thousands of years. However, in recent decades, the world has undergone massive changes. Our ways of living and learning, as well as our daily lives, are all different from the past. Great changes have occurred. Even people's mindsets are different from before. Some are always fearful. Some have fallen into depression, and others have lost all confidence in themselves. There are all sorts of situations. Speaking for myself, I became a monk in my youth at the age of 23. I spent most of my time as a teacher giving lectures in a monastery, so I didn't have much experience with lay life. But during these last few years, I have come into contact with many people from various places and found that people are suffering deeply in their hearts. Whether in the East or the West, all kinds of suffering are increasing day by day, although physical infrastructure and the development of science and technology nowadays is unlike that of any other era. This development of external science and technology is not in balance with the changes in our inner mental states. This is what has created the unique world we live in today. Living in such a unique world, I personally feel that methods that can bring inner joy, such as contemporary meditation or others like mantra recitation, mantras possess an uncommon power. There are also Buddhist insights into emptiness. If one has not studied the Dharma, one remains ignorant of the nature of one's own mind. If one observes the essence of the mind in detail, much of the world's suffering will naturally subside. That is my sense of it. For example, some practitioners in our Eastern monasteries may not have very good material or economic conditions, but their inner experience of joy is unlike anyone else's. This is something that can be observed directly. So for the teachers and students here today, whether it's regarding Eastern monasteries or Buddhists, the inner states of all practitioners, and it would be excellent to have opportunities to study and research them in the future. In our lives today, many people speak of the need to step out of their comfort zone. As for stepping out of comfort zones, I don't know if this was a thing in America before, but for instance, some people only ever go to the same restaurant. They have no appetite if they go anywhere else. In that restaurant, they only eat the same dishes, unwilling to try anything else. They also only chat with one or two friends, unwilling to reach out to anyone beyond that. Their circle is already fixed, and outside of that circle, they lack the courage to share and engage with others. There are many such people, but now one must summon the courage to move from familiar environments to new ones, drawing on each other's experiences and learning from one another, allowing oneself to integrate into a new life. Indeed, from the perspective of mental state, this is an uncommon and skillful method to enhance inner strength. Generally speaking, regarding Eastern and Western cultures, though using East and West is perhaps a bit broad. In the East, take the cultures of many places like Han area of China and Tibet, for example, while in the West, places like America and Britain. Across many different environments and ways of life, People's joy and suffering are essentially the same. However, their cultural developments are worlds apart. How do I view modern culture? Eastern culture mainly emphasizes self-improvement and progress, whereas Western culture is often centered on criticism. Why? Nowadays, whether in Tibet or Han China, many students attend Western schools. When they eventually return home, they become dissatisfied with everything and resort to constant criticism. Their character becomes quite different from others. Currently, some friends and parents wish to send their children to the West to study. While various aspects of Western education are relatively complete and sophisticated, there is a fear that after studying there, their respect for parents and teachers, as well as for our traditional culture, will diminish. Everyone is very worried about this. If such a bright person goes to the West to study, will they end up criticizing our monasteries and tradition, leading to major trouble? Many people share this concern. In the West, there are also parents who send their children to Tibetan monasteries and schools, and these children become very disciplined. By receiving education in such an environment, their mindset also undergoes a transformation. Nowadays, Western education has become the global mainstream, particularly American-style education, which many countries are emulating. For example, in your textbooks, many stories about animals are included. This wasn't common in traditional Chinese curriculum, as the mainstream Western education is gradually exerting its influence upon the world. However, regarding Western critical theory, according to their viewpoint, in terms of human development, it is crucial to analyze rationally rather than jump to conclusions. This is seen as especially important. Teachers in various schools now criticize everything to the best of their ability. From my perspective, this is quite extraordinary. But what I want to say here today is, you are all university professors and students. Perhaps a single choice or sentence of yours will have a profound impact on the world in the future. While it's difficult to change this style of education, one should conduct thorough research before criticizing. It is essential that criticism is well-founded and hits the mark. Many young people today criticize only superficially. Their wisdom is not yet mature. Thus, when they use their intellect to observe, there are points that do not align with the truth. This is clearly visible in our daily lives. I have also done some research on this. Critical theory flourished in the 20th century, shifting the direction of many people's lives. Nowadays, among our young people in Tibet, many are not very proficient in English, but they know Chinese relatively well. Relying on their Chinese, they emulate Western perspectives, indiscriminately criticizing Buddhist views and traditional customs. They criticize blindly, but much of that criticism lacks a logical basis. If we observe with wisdom, much of what they say does not align with the truth. Through criticism, many innovations have indeed emerged throughout human history. Superstitions that were contrary to the truth were demolished. In my view, this is the value of critical theory. Today, regarding our Tibetan Buddhist Terma, treasure teachings, pure perception, and other Mahayana teachings, some people have launched extensive criticisms from various angles. If these criticisms were based on facts, for instance, if a Terma teaching were proven false, or that certain Mahayana teachings were not spoken by the Buddha, if such claims aligned with the facts, we would be willing to accept that criticism because it would be reasonable. But if one randomly criticizes and looks for faults without understanding the background of Tibetan Buddhism, without knowing Buddhist history, background, and practice, then it becomes quite difficult. If during our research process we diverge from the truth, then for the researcher there will always be many difficulties at any time. The research findings will also find it very hard to play a significant role in human life. There was once a Western PhD student whose doctoral dissertation, according to reports, contained a certain situation. What was it? His thesis focused on Chanakya Rolpe Dorje's The Song of Right View, Recognizing the Mother of Wisdom. He took this as his research topic. In Chanakya Rolpe Dorje's work, there is a passage. Nowadays, some clever ones among us, obsessed with concepts of solid reality and inherent existence, set aside the vivid external appearances and go searching for an object of negation with horns. Yet in the countenance of the mother beyond obstacle, there is no such rising and falling of phenomena. The more unrealistic words are spoken, the more the mother of reality is likely to flee. When he went to research this is how he explained it in his thesis. Chanakya Rolpe Dorje was born in 1717 AD and lived until the age of 70. He said that during that era, the object of negation with horns was misunderstood as the need to slaughter horned sheep, goats, and cattle. Consequently, some youth went out to find and kill many animals. Chankya's mother could not bear it, which caused family discord and led her to plan her escape. That was his interpretation of the sentence. In fact, the content is about refuting the misconception that emptiness is not appearance. If one only refutes the appearance of emptiness, one misses the mother of Prajna Paramita, the perfection of wisdom that gives birth to all Buddhas. It is actually explaining the meaning of emptiness, but some researchers interpret it in that literal way. So, what is my greatest concern for the future of Tibetan Buddhism? If the original content is distorted during the research process, it is a great loss for both the East and the West. I believe this situation deserves serious attention. Furthermore, regarding future research, as I mentioned earlier regarding the biography Professor Janet discussed, yesterday at the University of Chicago, some teachers there were also researching the biography of Sera Khandro or Osel Khandro. Those books are very well written. Professor Janet is also researching the autobiography of Jigme Lingpa. This is excellent. Similarly, studying our Sutrayana culture, such as Madhyamaka, Buddhist logic, and Abhidharma Kosa, as well as the general tantras, would be wonderful. However, regarding the pith instructions in Tibetan Buddhism and those explaining specific practices, if one is to research these, one must receive the empowerment and preliminary instructions. Without these, I believe it is not quite right. Some Western teachers once told me that Vajrayana does not need to be kept secret. After reading some tantric treatises, he felt there was nothing unreasonable about discussing them openly. He suggested that saying Tibetan Vajrayana must be kept hidden was not a good approach. I then asked them jokingly, for instance, teachers keep their opinions on Buddhism secret, as well as their age and how much money they have at home. All these things are kept private. Then the pith instructions of our Tibetan practice need secrecy even more. Thus, even for the sake of mutual respect regarding certain extremely restricted tantras, where the author wrote Samaya, seal, 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 as a vow to prevent disclosure, if we are not cautious with these, our Buddhism will face a crisis of decline. In Tibet, it is generally the same. When the intellectual speculators and actual practitioners analyze, their viewpoints often clash. Practitioners prioritize pure perception and faith, while speculators criticize and refute the views of others using various forms of logic and debate. These two types of people exist within Tibetan Buddhism. Speculators are constantly refuting other sides, while practitioners focus primarily on their own practice. They fear the speculators and treat them like ghosts. I believe that if one wants to research religion, one must understand its background. Respecting religious customs is also very important. Take the perspective of Christian scholars, for example. When they conduct research, they must acknowledge the existence of God. Many scholars speak in this way. If they do not acknowledge their God or Creator, their teachings lose value and their research becomes meaningless. In Islam, for instance, there are other considerations. In the 2nd and 9th chapters of the Quran, it says that for those who hold wrong views or speak ill of their teachings, even killing such a person is in accordance with their religious law. It is stated very clearly in their scriptures. Because of this, those who currently research Islamic law do not dare to write offensive words or articles. Or regarding Indians, their religion maintains that once born in India, one is a Hindu, others simply do not fit in with them. Therefore, for researchers of Hinduism, anyone other than Indians themselves, those of other ethnicities or from other places, is unwelcome. Such is their tradition. For example, tens of thousands of us Tibetans have gone to India, yet Tibetan Buddhism and the Indian people remain distinct. Except for a very small number of Tibetans, there is little interaction with Hinduism. This is their tradition. Nowadays, some university students, when writing theses on religion, might note that Islam forbids eating pork, but then argue that eating it is not a sin, or that Hindus do not eat beef or slaughter cows, yet suggest that slaughtering and eating them should be permissible. Why? Because they find it rational. Modern researchers may say all sorts of things, but regarding religious traditions, we should all maintain a sense of respect. Similarly, Buddhism has its own traditions and views. While there are many perspectives, I hope that you university teachers and students, when conducting research in the future, will strive to clearly understand the background and history of Buddhism, as well as the core contents of Buddhism. All of these should be clearly understood and known. This is extremely important. Generally, one should investigate Buddhism before accepting it. The Buddha once said, "Oh, those wise ones and monks, regarding my words, you should examine them as you would smelt, forge, and polish gold. Accept them through analysis, not out of mere respect for me. Just as you would test the purity of gold, you must carefully examine the Buddha's teachings. Do not follow them simply because I am the great teacher." This is explicitly stated in the sutras. A wise man once said, "The insights of those who master scriptural authority and logical reasoning in ultimate meaning converge with those of experienced yogis. In the end, the ultimate meaning of analysis and practice is the same. If one is proficient in the doctrines of ultimate meaning and possesses the wisdom of personal experience regarding worldly knowledge that benefits self and others, if we ultimately put it into practice, all meanings will be found consistent and non-contradictory. Otherwise, everything clashes and one sees enemies everywhere. Not only does one lose their own joy, but one also fails to contribute to the world. Therefore, in our process of learning and in our process of research, benefiting all sentient beings and studying for the common good of humanity is, in my view, of vital importance. Regarding today's topic, specifically on the research of Tibetan Buddhism and world religions, I will conclude my talk here. Finally, I hope everyone can frequently quiet their minds. Regarding the various activities of life, do not hold too much attachment. While we need courage and commitment, extreme views or excessive attachment will only bring suffering. Therefore, do not let your mind be swept away by external circumstances. Instead, look within. You alone can tame your own mind. Oneself is one's own protector. Who else could the protector be? If you can find your own heart, you can master your own life and enjoy true happiness. So regarding these issues, if you have different viewpoints, we can discuss them during the Q&A session.